want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Milo Marquez, and I am the chair of the Latino Education Coalition. I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the presentation called Christian Nationalism, Project 2025, and the Attack on Public Education. We're gathering here tonight during an important time of great challenge and uncertainty, and our public education system faces unprecedented threats. In moments like these, we have a choice: stand up as a foundation of public education, or to empower ourselves with knowledge and organize and take action to defend it. Only together can we ensure that public schools remain a cornerstone of opportunity and equity for all of us. For over 3 decades, El Seminario Media has continued to support our community week after week. El Seminario is truly the only media outlet that has our interests in mind. El Seminario is our trusted media outlet. If you don't currently subscribe, please find the El Seminario QR code. You can find it on the screen or other places throughout the room. Our community needs El Seminario, and the only way to ensure that we have a media outlet like this is to continue to support it. I'd like to introduce our esteemed presenters tonight. Rob Rogers. Rob is a U.S. Air Force veteran, data strategist, and advocate for public education and the separation of church and state. As a co-founder of Subterra Insights, he helps campaigns and organizations make grounded, ethical decisions through data and strategy. Rob is nationally recognized for his work countering Christian nationalism and promoting secular student-centered policies. With decades of experience in civic leadership and agile transformation, he's committed to defending democracy at every level, from the classroom to the voting booth. Can we give Rob a round of applause? Rhonda Solis. Rhonda brings 30 years of experience in management and community outreach. Rhonda thrives most when she is working with community members and helping to solve challenging issues in her community. She volunteers for several nonprofits and has served on several boards and commissions, such as the 19th Judicial Nominating Commission and the City of Greeley Judicial Review Board. Rhonda served as Greeley Evans District 6 School Board for 8 years and proudly served Colorado's 8th Congressional District as a member of the Colorado State Board of Education. Rhonda is dedicated to ensuring that all Colorado students have a chance for success. Thank you, Rhonda. And Jackie Falcone. Jackie was born and raised in Denver's East Side community and is a 3rd-generation alum of Denver Public Schools. She is a social studies, ELD, and English teacher for the past 34 years working in the district. As did Jackie, her 2 remarkable children, and I changed this for you. Her 2 remarkable children attended Manual High School, one currently attending Colorado College, and the other a senior at Manual High School, who just received the Distinguished Becher Scholarship. Jackie comes from a long line of community advocates fighting for equality of Latinos and African Americans in her community. She is proud to continue her service to the community while working at Bruce Randolph Middle and High School in East Denver. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you. So I'm going to turn this over and let Rob start the presentation. Again, thank you all for coming.
Is there a Spanish translation or no?
We do not have a Spanish translation.
Thank you.
First of all, let me just say, I wanted to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to come and tell you about these things. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight are challenging. They may be challenging to hear, but I've spent a lot of time, especially over the last 5 years, trying to inform the public about the threat that we're facing, and it's threats that we're watching over the last 100 days of a certain president's administration. We are watching these things play out in real time. And it's really important for people to understand where this comes from and what the origins are. And it will help us predict what could be coming next. And tonight, after looking through what we are each going to be speaking about. My role in all of this is to kind of set the stage, to help you understand what's happening from a Christian nationalist perspective to public education. But, and then they are going to take over from there and explain how these things are becoming reality, and the things that we're experiencing in our everyday lives. So I hope that you're going to be able to take away something from this and take away some actions that you can take in order to prevent some of these things from happening.
Does this make sense to you? So phase one is the house. Phase two is the walls and the gates. Gates of education. We got to get on the school boards. We did it in South Lake, Texas right now. 1,000 people went in and flooded, took over the school board, took over the city council, took over the mayor's office. Boom. You know who it was? Christians did it. The media doesn't know it because we never said it was a church initiative. We called it a community initiative.
It doesn't sound very Christian of him, but if there is a face of the modern Christian nationalist movement, then it is that guy. His name is Lance Wallnau. He lives down in Texas. He is, if there is a face of this movement, which we refer to as Christian nationalism or Christian dominionism, it's him. And very, very quickly there, during a presentation back in 2021, he outlined how things happened in South Lake, Texas, and the very, very deliberate actions that Christian nationalists were taking in order to take over local government, including the school boards there. There's actually a really good podcast. NBC News won an award for this. It's called South Lake. If you want to hear more about the story of what Lance is saying. Lance is part of an informal organization that most people have not heard of, that's starting to become more prevalent as journalists are starting to write about this, but he is part of a loose organization called the New Apostolic Reformation. The New Apostolic Reformation, deliberately, they believe that they've been called by God to take over the United States and to implement a theocratic system of government. And they are working towards it, and they are very, very effective at what they do. This conversation tonight matters, and I'm so happy that so many of you are willing to come and listen to this. The first reason why this conversation matters, I'm going to have to make it a little bit personal, because this conversation matters to me because from first through ninth grade, I went to school in one of these Christian nationalist churches. Actually, there's a collection of 3 of them over that time period. I personally experienced sitting in a cubicle being force-fed Christian nationalist, misogynist, and racist curriculum for the first 9 years that I was in school. That's actually what led me to secular activism, and one of the main reasons why I'm talking to all of you today. So I guess I should thank them, in some respects. But I've experienced the type of education models and curriculum that our tax dollars will be openly used for if the Christian nationalists are successful. There is no question in my mind, because I lived it. And it's not pleasant, it's not fun, it should not even be considered education. So this conversation matters to me personally, because no kid should ever have to experience what I experienced during my first 9 years of going to school. The second reason why this conversation matters is because tonight I'm going to try to help you connect some dots in this very, very vast network, and hopefully help you understand how you have been influenced for most of your entire lives by these Christian nationalist organizations, and you might not have even known it. And now, at the very highest levels of government, now, there are active, open Christian nationalists, one of whom is the Speaker of the House. He is an open Christian nationalist, promotes this ideology. The framework that the Trump administration is using right now, has everyone heard of Project 2025? The framework that they are using, that they are implementing right now, was developed by the Heritage Foundation, which is a Christian nationalist organization, whether or not you knew it. All of our lives are being impacted by these people, and it almost happened almost completely under our noses and under the radar. And still, a lot of people don't realize it. Yes, sir.
Could you just real quick define theocracy, right? Theocratic. As you go along some of these terms, please give us a definition so everybody will understand, because I don't think maybe everybody does. We know SCOTUS right now is open to funding these schools now.
You're stealing my thunder in some respects, because I do have to explain, and part of this conversation is explaining what these terms mean.
Good, thank you.
But theocracy, since I don't think that I addressed that specifically, is a government, it's a form of government. Right? It would sit, alongside democracy or socialism or whatever else. But in a theocratic government, then a religion makes the law. And it's generally whenever people are being held accountable to that system of laws, they are being held accountable versus the religious definition of it. That's what theocracy is in short terms. But to your point, what is Christian nationalism? Because there's a lot of people, there are a lot of different definitions about it. And I've actually had to change how I talk about this with people, because I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of people in this room who consider themselves Christian, probably go to church, every Sunday, are actively involved in their church from some perspective. The fact that you are here learning about Christian nationalism means that you're not one, if that helps. Christianity and Christian nationalism are not the same thing. Now, I'm going to let Catherine Stewart explain her definition, because she puts it better than I can. And also just to promote her a little bit, because Catherine Stewart is one of the authors and journalists that is writing the best about this problem currently. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the books that she's written later on.
Christian nationalism is both a mindset and a machine. So the mindset includes an ideology that says America was founded to be a Christian nation, a certain kind of Christian nation. Our laws should be based on a reactionary reading of the Bible. But this ideology is a tool for a leadership-driven organization machine that turns that mythology into political power.
Christian nationalism is a political tool. It's about political power. It is not about religion. That's very important. And it's probably been confusing, right? Because you've been hearing about people talking about Christian nationalism. There are a lot of our current leaders who claim to be Christian. That seems to come up quite a bit, right? But then they don't behave that way. You notice that? They talk about this stuff quite a bit. They want, prayer back in schools, and they want to ban abortion for all of these religious reasons, but they don't act Christian. That's because they're not. Christian nationalism is a political movement, not a religious movement. It is a corruption of Christianity for political reasons. That's very important to realize. Let's talk a little bit more about the specifics, though. The idea that the United States was founded as a Christian nation on Christian principles is 100% a myth. And there's writing from the founding fathers that indicates this. There's a treaty called the Treaty of Tripoli that outlines very, very specifically. It says, this was written back in the late 1700s, that the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion. It says this. John Adams was president at the time and signed that treaty. So it is a myth. It's a myth that the Christian nationalists have created in order to solidify their own political power. That's one thing to remember. So the other thing that I like to include in that definition is that it is a merging of Christian and American identities. So that to be American is to be Christian is to be American. So that's also an aspect of what they do. But don't ever forget that it's all about political power, not about religious power. It's not, I can't say that this is some kind of coherent ideology. You're not going to find common definitions from the people that I would label Christian nationalists. And you're not going to hear, even back in the day, you're not going to hear people like Jerry Falwell or some of the other early televangelists that would characterize themselves that way. So it's not necessarily a coherent idea, which is why you see and hear so many different definitions of the term. But it is also something that is relatively recent in our history. You didn't really hear about theocratic goals of Christian nationalism prior to the mid-1960s. And there was a significant event that happened there on the side of the Civil Rights Act, and that was the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. Though at that point, up until 1965, the United States actually had quotas on who could immigrate to the United States that was heavily favoring immigrants, white immigrants from Western Europe. So whenever the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, whenever that was lifted, the quotas were lifted, you started to see all kinds of more black and brown people coming in the United States. And so that started, people started to feel the change then. They started being threatened by the change. And that's where this idea of nationalism started to come into play, because their origins and the influx of all the people that were different from what people in the United States were used to, started changing that. So yes, I am 100%, I'm not really implying, I'm just saying that there is a white supremacy aspect to Christian nationalism because of the way that it was formed. And we can talk about that at some other time because there's a lot to that story, but just realize that there is a white supremacist aspect to this. And it's one of the reasons why you will hear about white nationalist organizations being so closely affiliated with Christianity as well. Another thing that you do need to realize here is you need to understand the organization, how these different organizations are organized, how their efforts are organized. And the best way to explain this is through something called the Seven Mountains. So you might hear about the Seven Mountains Mandate. The Seven Mountains Mandate is actually, it's a key part of the New Apostolic Reformation, major Christian nationalist movements, specifically here in Colorado, which I'll talk about in just a minute. The Seven Mountains Mandate is a biblical prophecy that they subscribe to. That prophecy, and I've read the scripture, they base this on several different times, and I still don't really understand how they are making that leap, but they do, and they take it very seriously. That prophecy says that when Christians, specifically evangelical Christians of the Christian nationalist flavor, control the 7 spheres of influence within society, that's going to trigger the second coming of Christ. So they are literally trying to usher in the end of the world. The 7 mountains, these spheres of society, this is based on sociological theory, that there are 7 major spheres of a society that influences that society as a whole. But education, which we're talking about tonight, religion, family, business, government, arts, entertainment, and media. These are some of the places that you've been influenced by Christian nationalists, and you probably don't even know it. It's funny. Every time I bring this up and every time I show this particular image, I focus in on family. You know why? Whenever I'm driving from my house in Colorado Springs to get out on I-25 to drive to Denver, you know what I have to drive past? Focus on the family headquarters. Focus on the family. Isn't that weird? All of this time, it was hidden in plain sight. They told us what they were doing and why. We never realized it. Focus on the family. James Dobson, 100%, one of the OG Christian nationalists in the United States. And I have to drive past it to get here. Education, we're going to talk about more about that tonight. Business and government is obvious. You can kind of see what they're doing on a daily basis from a government perspective. Arts and entertainment. There's if anybody on TikTok or Instagram ever come across a dancer called Miranda Derrick, she was a viral dancer for a little while. She was actually an employee of a company that was producing a lot of different viral dance videos on Instagram and TikTok. You know what the name of the company was that she works for? 7M Films. Isn't that interesting? Right there in the name. They just told us that plainly, and she is part. They did a Netflix documentary about that, which I can't remember the name of right now. Dancing with the Devil, I believe, on Netflix, is about Miranda Derrick and 7M Films. Christian nationalist influencer. Media, I always like to tell this story too because it shows how much influence they have. So during the first Trump administration back in 2017, you know how it's always like a big deal for what news outlet, what journalist is going to get the first interview with a newly sworn in president? They're like competing, right? So in January 2017, shortly after Trump was sworn in for the first time, there's the usual competition. And you know who got the first interview with Donald Trump back in January 2017? That was ABC News' David Muir. So not too much of a surprise there. But the person who got the second interview with him is a guy named David Brody, who is the senior political correspondent for CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, another Christian nationalist organization directly affiliated with us. Most powerful person in the world. The second interview was with Christian Broadcasting Network, so we can continue to appeal to and and influence Christians. That's how prevalent and influential this has all become. So this is one of these things that, like, once you see, you can't unsee, because now everything that I see in the news and I see in our local government and things that are going on around us, I can't see it any other way but within this structure. And hopefully now you will too, because this is how they're doing it, through these 7 focus areas, trying to usher in the end of the world. Don't forget that part. I didn't include the video of this in here, but Lauren Boebert, I know that I'm sure that you all have heard. Also, Christian nationalist influencer. There's video of her that I've used in other presentations where she is talking about can't wait, until God comes back. You all get to be part of the second coming of Jesus. So, sitting representative is also promoting this ideology. But how do you know it whenever you hear it? That's also an important point. Milo and I talked a lot about this while we were getting ready for this particular presentation. How do you know it whenever you hear it? I'm going to show you a super clip here, several different Christian nationalists making some statements. Some of the names might surprise you, and I'm also just going to preface this with some of this is hard to hear. This is their own words. I no editing, no image. This is their own words, and this is what Christian nationalism sounds like.
Let's say you can wave your Christian nationalist wand. We wake up tomorrow in a Christian nation, a Christian nationalist nation as you're describing. All right? There's a lot of fears that people have. Here's one of them. Will women have the right to vote tomorrow if you wave that magic Christian wand? Okay, why not? And I want to get into why not.
Nation tomorrow, and women did have the right to vote, we would not have a Christian nation within 50 years.
Okay, it's welcome. I just want to say welcome to the end of democracy. The Civil Rights Act, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon. Yeah, and that's the reality. And so we just need to fundamentally relook at a lot of our civil rights legal regime. And without that, even though I don't think it's sort of the magic bullet, but I think without that, there's limits to the amount of progress we're going to make. Let's talk about discourse and dialogue. This topic would have been even more forbidden 4 or 5 years ago, but it's now becoming in more and more mainstream circles. Is that because the problem is becoming worse, or that our side is more courageous to confront it?
We need to be the party of nationalism.
Under this Governor Polis here, there's 3 things: crime, inflation, and drugs are out of control. Because when I brought up about that election the first time around, I really didn't say much. I put a picture of Garrett Polis with his husband and 2 children, adopted children, and then I put the other up, a man and a wife and a family, and I just said, do I need to say anything else? And you're talking about the United States of America. Talking about the United States of America, because when Matthew mentioned it in the Bible, he wasn't talking about the physical ground that he was on. He was talking about something in the distance. So if we're going to have one nation under God, which we must, we have to have one religion, one nation under God and one religion under God, right? All of us together, working together.
What does God say is the answer, is the solution for the homosexual in 2022, here in the New Testament, here in the book of Romans, that they are worthy of death? These people should be put to death. Every single homosexual in our country should be charged with the crime, the abomination of homosexuality that they have. They should be convicted in a lawful trial. They should be sentenced to death. They should be lined up against the wall and shot in the back of the head. That's what God teaches.
Let me just say that I haven't asked Sheriff Maxwell this, but I did have a police chief from Woodland Park come visit me a couple of years ago. He's not the current police chief, and he said we had multiple times as much weapons in Caris as they had in the police department. I don't know if that holds true with the sheriff's department, but we are armed to the hilt.
There's not any of us that are going to escape this. All of us are at risk. Doesn't matter where we're from. Doesn't matter what gender we are. Doesn't matter what race we are. Doesn't matter what religion we are. Doesn't matter. They are coming for all of us. If we don't subscribe to their version of Christianity, then they're coming for all of us. Right down to, did anybody notice what Charlie Kirk was talking about? Charlie Kirk is one of the primary people that's part of this movement. They're talking about eliminating civil rights deliberately. And they're using, Charlie Kirk specifically is using Christian youth, using teenagers in order to spread that particular message. Colorado, I mean, I had Colorado clips in there for a reason. And that's because if you all didn't know, you live in the state of one of the hubs of this movement. So much of this stuff originated here and continues to originate here, specifically in Colorado Springs and Woodland Park. Colorado Springs is the third largest faith-based economy in the United States. Anybody want to guess what number one is, just for comparison? Salt Lake City, Utah is number one. That's how much of an influence that Colorado Springs has on the faith-based economy. You also saw Andrew Womack. If you're not familiar with him, he founded Charis Bible College, Andrew Womack Ministries in Woodland Park. They have set out to take over Woodland Park City government there and have been very, very successful at doing exactly that. Colorado is used as an experiment, as a test case in a lot of ways, because of a thing that's different about Colorado that is not the same in a lot of other states, and that's home rule. So our government in Colorado is backwards from a lot of other states, where in a lot of states, the state government pushes down things to local government. In Colorado, it works exactly the opposite way, where local government has control over things, and their control is only restricted by exception. So it provides a lot of opportunities for school boards, local city governments to implement some things because there's no higher authority to tell them to stop doing it. Also, just as an aside here, the sheriff that was with Andrew Womack in that clip, we were talking about Charis being armed to the hilt. Name of Sheriff Mike Sell. Anybody recognize that name? He's running for governor, in case you're wondering. So just keep that in mind as we're getting closer and closer to elections in 2026. So we do have to talk about the framework for all of this as well, because there's got to be policy that's put in place in order to make this stuff work from a government perspective, right? You can't just be some preachers, getting them behind the pulpit and saying that they want these things done and they happen. There's got to be actual policy. And that's where Project 25 comes into play. But the thing that and everyone is hopefully much more familiar. I've read the Project 125 document, the 900-page document. I've read it 4 times, just so I can see, predict, start to understand what it is that they're going to be doing. But what's important, we're watching all of that happen. What's important for everyone to know is that Project 25 is not new. This mandate for leadership, the formal title of the document is actually a mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. That's the whole title. The first one, the one we are dealing with right now, is actually the 8th version of it. The Heritage Foundation has published 8 versions of it since the original one was released in 1981 during the Reagan administration. You can go on the Heritage Foundation. They are the architects of the mandate for leadership. It's always been a huge policy document of all the things that they want to see a conservative administration implement. You can go on the Heritage Foundation website right now, look at their successes. They have a link on the front of their website called Successes. Go all the way down to 1981, and they list the first edition of the Mandate for Leadership as one of their primary successes because during the first 4 years of Ronald Reagan's administration, 2/3 of that policy document back in 1981 were implemented. We're over half of Project 2025 has been implemented in the first 100 days. First 100 days of Trump's administration, they were able to accomplish almost as much as what happened in the Reagan administration in 4 years. If anybody ever tries to tell you that they don't mean that, they can't do that, they're not actually going to do that, tell them that they're wrong. Because they absolutely are, they absolutely will, and they have a history of doing so. So the Heritage Foundation was actually created by a guy named Paul Weyrich. And I can go on and on, as some people in this room know about Paul Weyrich, because he is the originator of all of this. Paul Weyrich, as an example of how influential he was. Has anybody heard that name before, Paul Weyrich? One person, okay? He is probably the single most influential person in American politics ever. And as an example, he created the wedge issue, the first wedge issue in 1972. He actually coined the term wedge issue. You know what the first wedge issue was? Abortion rights. He created it. He is the one who saw that there is a huge population of evangelical Christians in the United States that were not voting in large numbers. And he had to figure out a way to motivate them. So he invented the abortion issue out of whole cloth, specifically to get more Christians to turn out to vote. And then 40 years later, what happens? What happened in 2022? Roe versus Wade was overturned. That's the other thing to remember about these organizations, that they think long term.
Yep.
They think in decades. Unfortunately, on our side of the equation, we typically react. We're very, very reactive. We're not thinking in decades. We're barely thinking past next month, because we have to fight whatever it is that's thrown at us now. That's putting us at an extremely large disadvantage. They are patient. They are deliberate. They are strategic. I don't even like characterizing them as stupid. We like to characterize Donald Trump as being stupid. Maybe he is. Probably he is. He's probably stupid. But think about who he got elected to the presidency twice, in spite of getting impeached twice. He can't be that stupid. That's because he surrounded himself with people from the Heritage Foundation. So many people in his administration. Part of Project 2025 was creating the LinkedIn of conservatives. They had been gathering resumes of people for 2 years prior to Trump getting elected. They didn't make the same mistakes that they made the last time. They already had people vetted, ready to be hired into these positions to implement his plan specifically. So always remember, and if you're talking to like other people about this, it didn't originate in 2024 whenever you first heard about it. It originated in 1981, and then they did it all. This is every one of the logos of every one of the organizations that is part of the Project 2025 Advisory Committee. All of these organizations have organized and come together, all moving in one direction to see these policy plans implemented. And I'm putting the picture down here of Paul Weyrich and also James Dobson, because Paul Weyrich is the one who was responsible for the political organization aspects. James Dobson was responsible for the Christian nationalist organization and motivations. And they work together very, very well. And we've already experienced a lot of this, whether or not you realize it. You'll notice down here, lower left, Moms for Liberty. I'm sure that y'all have heard of them, trying to take over school boards, with a bunch of fear-mongering, wedge issue language. I've got a feeling, it's coming up here pretty soon. Tina Deskovich, who is one of the founders of Moms for Liberty, is actually going to be in Aurora for a town hall coming up here soon. That makes me think that Aurora Public Schools are probably one of their targets this fall. I would keep that in mind. Moms for Liberty was they're not grassroots. They like to talk about how they've been funded by people buying T-shirts. They were funded by the Heritage Foundation. They're a political propaganda arm of the Heritage Foundation. Complete manipulation there. You pop up over here to see where it says American Birthright. Did anybody hear about Woodland Park School District implementing the American Birthright standards? There was some discussion, and I think that Vonda actually may have been part of these discussions in the State Board of Education. They tried to get American Birthright included as part of state educational standards, and that was rejected. But because of local control, school districts can kind of do what they want to. The only school in the nation to implement that whitewashed Christian nationalist social studies standard is the Woodland Park School District, still the only school district in the United States that's done it. That was developed by the National Association of Scholars, also part of Project 125, and a lot of their members are the ones that drafted the 80 or so pages out of that 900-page document that is specifically about the Department of Education. But there are some surprising organizations that are on this list. But this is to give you a sense of the scope and the scale of what it is that we're dealing with. Always remembering that the Heritage Foundation is a Christian nationalist organization by design. And so what are we experiencing now from an education perspective? Switching gears to the actual topic of tonight. What we are seeing right now, and the reason why our public schools are under so much threat, which Jackie and Rhonda will talk more about, is because there's a merging that's happening right now. I've explained the Christian nationalist aspects and what their goals are. You have these religious ideologues that want to see what they see public schools as is indoctrination centers. These are places where they're both religious and conservative ideology can be implanted in the minds of kids, almost like from their first experiences in school. This is these big buildings full of kids, impressionable kids. That's why Charlie Kirk has the job. His assigned role in all of this is to reach kids. They're growing the next generation of Christian nationalists. So that's why they see public schools in that way. They also have wanted to be able to use taxpayer dollars to fund religious education since almost, well, it really goes back to Brown versus Board. As soon as you made the white kids go to school with the black and the brown kids, you know, the white people didn't like that all that much, and immediately started using religious schools as an excuse to avoid integration. So it's been going on for that long. They haven't stopped. They didn't stop with abortion. They haven't stopped with that either. And so they see opportunities to spread their message using our tax dollars if they can. That's their goal. That's the kind of school that I'm in from first through ninth grade. But then over here on the other side, you've got the corporate reformers. You've got the very, very wealthy, the billionaires, you know, that are out there, that what they see, they will all tell you that they want education to be better. They want to get kids out of failing public schools, continuing to repeat that myth, because our public schools are failing. But they continue to repeat that myth. They try to make themselves seem altruistic. They're good people, good guys, good billionaires. They just want to see kids educated. It's a lie. That's not their goal. Their goal, what they see every student as a profit generator. They want to make money off of our kids, selling them testing, selling them curriculum, tuition. They see this completely untapped market. That's why they're doing it. So the corporate reformers, the religious Christian nationalists, they don't necessarily have the same end goal up there at the top, but it's close enough where they can work together. That's why you see something like what is happening right now. I think the hearing is probably already concluded. They probably recessed for the day. There is a Supreme Court case being heard right now today. I listened to a lot of it today, where a religious charter school, a Catholic charter school in Oklahoma, was suing the state. They've taken it all the way to the Supreme Court. A religious charter school, they want to be included in tax funding. They're arguing that in front of Supreme Court right now. One little tidbit about Supreme Court, because we might be thinking, okay, they've upheld the separation of church and state for like years, right? They probably get stopped SCOTUS. In case you haven't noticed, the current justices are, most of them were appointed, well, not most of them, but the majority of them were appointed by Trump for various reasons. But then you've also got like interesting things too, like Samuel Alito flying a pine tree flag outside his house. And everybody like doesn't really know like what that means. Everyone's really confused, about what that appeal to heaven flag means. And it is a primary symbol of the New Apostolic Reformation and Christian nationalism. I first saw that flag when back in Arkansas, state senator named Jason Rape was flying it outside of his office back in 2013. That's whenever I first learned what that meant. And then whenever I see it, I was like, oh my God, we've got a Supreme Court justice who's flying like one of their symbols. Oh, I'm a little pessimistic about how they're going to rule in that case. But this is why you've got the charter community, the people who want to make money off of kids, partnered up with the Christian nationalists who are now challenging the ability of a state to exclude religious schools from tax funding, happening right now. And whether or not you knew it, I've already implied this a little bit. We're gonna go back to Lance Wall now, real quick here. He's one of the primary people promoting all of these ideas. This is him talking in Woodland Park back in 2022.
I'm saying that we need to have a new financing model. And part of that is we need to start to have the funding that's supporting the unity of the spirit. I think that's probably what this organization does best. The funding is transparently working for the purpose of transforming what's going on in America, but Colorado is the test case. This is where the devil chose to mess up the state. Whether the lawyers in order to tear apart the state while you slept and for the state up. The body is pushing back. The law. This becomes a blueprint for other states. Does that make sense? So that's what you're doing. So it's very important. And some organizations are regional, some organizations are local. We need to start to vet who we're working with locally. Events need to be populist gatherings that mobilizing the political and governmental potential of changing America and infusing it with the spirit of Jesus Christ.
Whether or not you knew it, you live in a test case. We are all being experimented on. And I'm going to give you a really practical example about how they're doing that. If people are aware of Erin Lee, she's a mom somewhere up in northern Colorado who is, her child was allegedly groomed to be transgender in an art class or something, right? Heard of that case? And then they tried to, some of the activists tried to get a ballot initiative put on the ballot so we could all vote on someone else's rights. And wasn't it weird how that story, which was obviously, I mean, hopefully everybody like wrinkled their eyebrows at that. Kid goes to art class getting groomed to be transgender. It doesn't work that way. But she got national attention really, really quickly, right? Seemed like that kind of exploded kind of overnight. That's because Lance Wallnow was helping. They found that little test case that we can make something out of this. And now, 2 years later, what's one of the primary things that we're hearing about in the news related to education in schools like right now? Whether or not transgender girls can play in girls' sports. It's invented. They're very, very good at this. Very, very good. But Lance Wallnow is involved with all of this, like right here in Colorado. They do use it as a test case. We're going to come back. I know that I just like set y'all all up to like go home very, very depressed. After Jackie and Rhonda tell us more about what's happening like locally from an education perspective, we are going to come back real quick and we're going to talk about some specific things that you can do. And thanks again for having me.
My name is Rhonda Solis. I grew up in Greeley, spent most of my life here in Colorado between Erie and Greeley. Those were the only two places that I've lived. So if you know anything about Greeley, it's located in Weld County. Weld County is the county that wanted to secede from the state of Colorado. So that is in my backyard. The stuff that he just told you is in my backyard every day. And I knew that if I was going to equip myself with the skill set that I needed to find my friends in Denver and do any kind of training that I could possibly do. I started with Latina Initiative with Dusty Gurale, did Latina Debate Boot Camp. I also attended Latino Advocacy Day every year. And then I did the Colorado Latino Forum political cohort. I was in the first one. And then I also took Latino Leadership Institute. So I learned all of that from some great mentors here in Denver. And I took that back to my community and did whatever I could to make sure I represent the people in my community. Now we have a meatpacking plant. We have lots of agriculture. We have lots of construction. So the wealth of Weld County has been built on the backs of people of color. And they need to have strong voices to make sure that they have some kind of representation. And so I ran for my local school board. And at that time, there's a pastor, Pastor Meek, who would send emails all the time trying to get Bible curriculum in our school district. And so I've been experiencing this for over 13 years now when it comes to education. So I've been paying attention. When I got on the school board, that's when COVID, I was on the school board during COVID, and we would have people come in and talk about, not wanting to wear masks and parental rights and all of this stuff. And that was a tough time for all of us. So I really did listen, and I really did try to pay attention to what their concerns were. And so I wore a mask all the time. I encouraged that. I helped get some vaccine clinics in a lot of our communities where we weren't getting vaccinated, and that was our Latino community. And so I was really fighting that. Then there was a little bit of a shift, and it came to the vaccine. And all of a sudden, these same parental right parents were now mad at parents that were getting the vaccine for their kids. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, then this isn't really what this is about. And that hypocrisy, it was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I know that this is not what it's about. Then it shifted to our teachers are groomers. And we have these books in our schools that are influencing our kids. And then it came to LGBTQ issues. And we need to get these kids, and we need to get, make sure that we have, policy within our school district to protect our kids from LGBTQ kids. And that incident that he was talking about was in Fort Collins, which is our neighbor. And there was a whole documentary made about it called Whose Children Are They? And all of this process was to really demean public education, to demean our teachers who are trying to make sure that every kiddo feels welcomed in their classrooms. And that's where a lot of this energy was from. Now, I was part of the whole conversation about redistricting in this new district that was going to be formed. And I was excited. Ken Buck had been my leader for a long time. I was ready to get rid of him. So I fought to be a part of this new district with Adams County and this Congressional District 8. Well, I had just got done serving my 8th year on the local school board. I was more than ready to be done. There were meetings that we were actually escorted in and out by police for our safety because of all the COVID people that had come into our school board meetings. And so I was kind of tapped out. But then they told me that there was a seat at the state board. And I looked at the makeup of the state board of ed, all white and no representation. Now, when I got elected, I was the first person to represent CD8. At the state board, I was the youngest person. I was the only person without a college degree. And I really, truly represented community. Now, once I got elected, of course, all the things in my district came to the surface of what the concerns were, and Adams 14 was in my district. I don't know if you all paid attention to Adams 14, but that is a community that is continually targeted and going through so much because of Suncor. You have children that almost have to sleep sitting up because of the bloody noses. Commerce City is considered a sacrifice zone for Suncor. Now, when I got into office, the State Board of Ed had just passed to put that district in reorg. Reorg means that that community has to put a committee together and decide whether they're going to dissolve their district and let the surrounding community districts absorb them, if they're going to let charters come in and take them over, or if they're going to redo their boundaries. All of those things are extremely traumatic to a community and expensive and timely. And so when I got on the board, first of all, I was like, how do we have this kind of power as a state board of ed? None of us even lived in Commerce City, but yet we can push this on them. And how did we get here? Because of that test, that state test that happened. That's how I, as a state board member, had to define how a district was doing, how a school was doing, and that was the measurement that would come before me. Now, I know from growing up in traditional public ed, I'm a product of traditional public ed, so are my kids. That test cannot tell you how my kids are doing in school, that one-time test. And let me remind you how many opt-outs that they have. So I'm using this data to assess this district. And after 10 years, they decided that this district was not doing any better. And let me remind you, for the last 14 years, we weren't even fully funding public education as a state. But this community was expected to do this and meet this certain benchmark that they had met, or else this was going to happen. So when I got on the board, I was asking questions. So what does this look like? You know, what has our history been? How has this rolled out before? Well, it's never been done before. So you're telling me this community in the sacrifice zone, which has an all Latino school board, and all those kids in that district look just like me. This is going to be the test that we're going to run this on. And we have no experience doing this. We have nothing to fall back on to say that here's a successful way of doing that. And I was like, no, how can this happen? So let's say this committee picks, you know what, we want the other communities to absorb us, because they were starting to get a lot of community support. Because if this could happen to their school district, it could happen anywhere. And so people started to pay attention. Well, I asked, what if, because if that happens, then those communities actually have to go to their voters. The voters would have to say yes. And if the voters said no, then we were right back where we were. Now, at the time, Commerce City, Adams 14 was actually starting to move the needle. They were actually starting to get somewhere. So I kept asking, why would we push this on a community when they're starting to make headway? And if these things don't work, which are timely and costly, then they're right back where they started. Why would we not support them? Why would we not help them be the district that they need to be? So once I got in there and started a little bit of a ruckus, we were able to vote and take that off the table. So then we started working with the district and really started to try and help them get things better. Now, the power that I have as a state board member on that community is because legislation was put in place to make sure that the door is open for charters. And then in order to go along with that, you have to have board members on the State Board of Ed who are pro-charter. Now, I did all of this training here in Denver. I had a ton of mentors. And so when I got to the state level and started learning more about politics around education, all of a sudden I was on the opposite side of some of my mentors. And I was like, how did this happen? I come from community organizing. I'm a community activist. We raise all boats. We don't worry just about our children. And if we're plucking out the kids and the parents that have privilege, meaning they know how to facilitate which school they want their kids to go to, they can transport their kid, they can do the volunteer hours that are required at a charter school. They don't have free and reduced lunch there. So, you know, I'm a parent that I can pay for my kids' lunch. I'm good with that. I'm golden. And in my community, my only experience with charters was white flight. They allow some brown kids to go there, and it's the brown kids with privilege. And what that message tells me is we're going to let a few of them out, but we can't educate them all well, because that's too much. That's too many well-educated brown kids. No, we can't have that. And the other part is we're going to take the parents and convince them that they're now one of us and they could be part of this. So then they don't go back to help that community. They don't go back to help those kids that are not theirs. That is totally opposite of what I learned out here in Denver. And yet that's what the people of color were telling me is now the new way to go. They were supporting charters. And some of the people I was talking to, their kids didn't even go to a charter. They went to a private school. So they're not even talking the talk and walking the walk. So I had a meeting with someone who is a huge mentor of mine, who served on a board of the Colorado League of Charters. And she was trying to explain to me why charters are so great. And my only experience is mine, white flight over here. And nothing that I've seen so far has helped change my mind. But she thought she could change my mind. So we had this conversation. Well, when I was first running, I was also running alongside Kathy Plumer, who was running for the at-large seat. Kathy was running against a guy named Dan Malloy. Dan Malloy was absolutely awful. He would have been awful for kids of color. He would have been awful for communities. And yet the Colorado Charter League endorsed him, and she was on this board. And I asked her, how do you defend that? How do you defend that? He's awful. But the only reason that they endorsed him was because he was pro-charter. And so to me, that's a strong message. So I tried to do some history as to why charters even started in the first place, and I got lots of different answers. Well, there's too much red tape in traditional public ed, so we wanted to take some of that out, and we wanted to, see if there were new ways to educate kids, and we would share that with, the other schools. That didn't happen. Then someone tried to tell me, well, we started charters here because we really wanted to help kids of color. Well, when the whole conversation happened, it was rich white Democrats, conservatives, and the Independent Institute having that conversation. There was no one that looked like me at that table, but you're going to tell me in the early 90s, these white people got together and were trying to figure out how to help someone like me. Really, that's what you're going to try and sell me. The other point was, well, we're going to figure out how to close the gaps. We're going to figure out how to close those education gaps because traditional public ed isn't doing it. They're horrible. When I first got elected to the State Board of Ed, there was legislation that was passed that a third party had to come in and evaluate the Colorado schools. That included charters. That report said charters are not outperforming traditional public ed by much. And I thought to myself, how can that be? They don't have kids with disabilities. They don't have a lot of ELL stuff. They don't have a lot of poverty. How are they not knocking it out of the park? Because what we really learned is what we already knew. You have to fully fund public education. Smaller classroom sizes are better. And you have to support parents. You have to support community. We know that. We are not learning anything new from charters. There is not a silver bullet in curriculum. There's not a silver bullet with a certain charter. You cannot put a Band-Aid and go into a community and start a charter and not address what's going on in the community. It's putting a Band-Aid on it. That's solving nothing. And I learned this from my cousin because my cousin lives in Montbello. And she takes her kid to the DSST charter. And I thought to myself, why would you take them to the charter? And she's like, because these schools, I didn't know if I could put my kids there. And I thought to myself, of course, because it is cheaper to pluck a few kids out of their community, put them in a charter, than it is to actually build up that neighborhood and really support that school. And so I have to say, coming out here, I don't know what happened to my friends that I learned from on how to do community activist work. I don't know how the switch happened, but it's there. And just like Rob said, I learned more about Democrats for education reform, which I had never knew about, than I have ever even thought could be part of this equation. Because now we're seeing people from DFER, Democrats for Education Reform, and Christian nationalists now in the same bed together, whether they wanted to be or not, because they're pushing the same agenda. An agenda that was put in place years ago at the time of desegregation. Because when that happened, they did not want their kids to go to school with kids that looked like me. The other part of that is clear over here, privatization. Now, when desegregation happened, that was not going to be something that you could pull people together on. So they switched. They got smart. They're planners. They picked abortion. Abortion is the issue that we could get people together on. But now we need a vehicle. What's that extra vehicle that we're going to take over there? It's choice. Charters and choice. And what's privatization? Choice 2.0. Now you can use taxpayer money to go to a private school or possibly go to a charter that now has religion in it. I have struggled really figuring out how to maneuver all of this. Like I said, these are people I looked up to, people that I learned from, and yet we're on the opposite sides of this. As a longtime Democrat in Will County, that's very red, very Republican, and it's hard to stay and be positive and be out as a Democrat. I didn't know all this stuff got deeper. But if I looked at the state website for Democrats, and I looked at their education platform, I would be like, yes, that's exactly what I believe. Little did I know the power and money that was happening around different legislative things, getting people elected. All of that was working underneath. And I had no knowledge of it as a longtime Democrat in Greeley, Colorado. But I started to learn real quick. So I don't know if anybody paid attention to the CD2 primary for State Board of Ed. So Kathy Gebhardt had put her name out to run, who is amazing. Her resume is like stellar. And all of a sudden, DFER didn't like her as a candidate because she's not as pro-charter as they would like. So our governor helped pick a person to run against her, Marisol Rodriguez, who I'd never heard of in the Democratic Party. I'd never seen her in the education field. I've never seen her on Latino issues. I have never seen this woman. And all of a sudden, that race had $1 million put behind it against Kathy Gebhardt. We had people getting phone calls asking, hey, are you going to support the candidate that the governor endorsed? And so I started looking at Governor Polis different. And I looked up to him before. He had supported my campaign the first time around. But I never asked him for an endorsement because I knew there was some other stuff going on and I wasn't quite sure how that would shake out. The more I learned, the more upset I got. Now, I was starting to learn about different organizations out here that supposedly support our communities. One of them is Transform Education Now. Guy that runs that is Nick Martinez. He's now changed his name, I think, to Nick Hernandez. But I had met him the first time around at Latino Leadership Institute. And at that time, the stuff he was telling me, I was like, yes, I believe in this. Yes, we need to support our brown kids. Yes, yes, yes. But now, when I was running again for the State Board of Ed, I had someone running against me who had run for her local school board in Thompson, and her community did not elect her. But all of a sudden, she thought she should run for CDA, State Board of Ed. She was a Moms for Liberty candidate. You just saw that up here. And guess who endorsed her? Transform Education Now. So what that tells me is this isn't about our community. This isn't about our people. It's about people making money off of these charters. And full disclosure, I don't have a private company. My kids are 31 and 34, so I don't have any kids in K-12 education. I don't have any grandkids. I profit from this in no way, shape, or form. I come before you because the more I learned, the more mad I got. And I want to make sure that you know what's going on. And I want to make sure that you are paying attention. Because we have a governor's race coming up. And I don't know if you've heard of Charter School Institute. Charter School Institute is a place to go get charter authorization without even having to go to your local school board, which you as a community elected. And guess who puts that board together of that organization? The governor. It's not an elected board, it's an appointed board. And there's no oversight. And guess who's on that board? Nick Martinez. And so this stuff is so interconnected, all the dots, everything that is going on. And you know, it's so hard to watch this from my community. Even the person that was running against me, Yasmin Navarro, she came here undocumented. And yet she campaigned with Gabe Evans, who would have deported her as quickly as they could if she was still undocumented. So what's happening in our community is so hard to witness and watch. Watching my mentors turn in a direction that I did not expect was hard to watch. Watching a party that I thought was for me was hard to watch. And, I even learned about President Obama. Education took a huge hit under him. On one hand, he's saying, let's take away privatization of healthcare because everybody has a right to healthcare. We're going to, do the Affordable Care Act. We're going to open it up. And why does that work? Because you have people with privilege and that are healthy and people that don't have as much privilege and may have some more challenges. They're in the same pool. They help each other. That's what education is. And yet he was a big proponent of reform. Now, it would be different if we saw some communities that have done this, done it well, and successful, but it has not been. Look at Chicago. They've tried this experiment. Look at New Orleans. They tried this experiment. It doesn't work. And then you look at Arizona, who now has vouchers. And it blew up their state economy. But guess what? Amendment 80 that was on our ballot, the one that our governor didn't even take a stance on, was a very close vote. And the reason it was is because we have been tricked and targeted and pushed about choice. And people have bought into it hook, line, and sinker. Our universal preschool program that our governor put together, if you really look at that, it is a voucher program.
What is it?
So a voucher is that you take your taxpayer for pupil funding and it follows you wherever you go. Meaning you can take it to a religious school, you can take it to a private school. And that's what Amendment 80 was trying to do, was trying to change our state constitution to say, you can now take your money to a private school if you want to. But here's the rub. And even with the charter situation that we have now in choice, it's not choice for all. It's choice for some. Some who have privilege. Some whose parents know how to navigate the system. Some who read English, and because the forms may not be translated. In my community, they're not translated. That's another barrier to keep kids out. And so what we're witnessing is the privatization of our education. And we have got to fight it hard. And we have got to push traditional public ed. When I was on my local school board, we have a lot of racism in Weld County. It's true. We have lots of stuff we need to work on. But the strangest thing happened. We came together for kids, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and we built and supported our school district in a way that we haven't in a long time. And when you talk about people learning about other communities, learning about different socioeconomics, traditional public ed is the best place to experience that. And let me remind you, K-12 education is the most innocent we're ever going to be as humans. We separate ourselves by religion. We separate ourselves by different parties. K-12 is a time for us to learn about each other. K-12 is a time to learn about differences and figure out how to work together. Now, my charge as a local school board was to make sure that we put things in place for kids after K-12 ed. Did they have a pathway to a career? Did they have a pathway to college? Did they have a pathway to the military? What was their plan? We need to make sure that we support it. Pulling kids apart and then putting them on a campus where there's that kind of diversity, I almost think is cruel. It sets you up. I loved my LLI experience, but I also know that after I left there, that was not the world that was going to be, I wasn't going to be surrounded by Latino professionals. That's not real world. And we have some huge issues, some huge problems. These kids have to know how to work together and figure this stuff out. And it cannot be what's good just for my child. It really has to be what is good for our children. And we all have to take responsibility for that. We talked about Ronald Reagan, and I'm not surprised we're here. They talked about dismantling public education. They put a test in a place to start that process. They talked about choice and charter to move move us over to privatization. And look how close we are. Their plan worked. And now we even have people, I'm pro-union. Charters don't even have a union. I want my kids to be taught by a licensed teacher, by someone who loves this profession, that they went to school to do it the best that they can. You don't have to be a licensed teacher in a charter. Why would that be acceptable? Because if we can make it cheaper, then that's the route we'll go. But we can't do that anymore. We have to fully fund our schools. We have to make sure that kids have opportunities in public ed. And we do that by doing partnerships. Our community did that. We have internships. We have more schools now. We passed a bond. We passed our first MLO ever. And that was to support our kids. And I was so proud of my community when we did that. And I think that is the silver bullet. That is the answer to public education. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not a charter. It's not a curriculum. It's when we as community come together to support our kids. And when we go beyond just that child and we help families, we help the whole structure, because that permeates out to the community and then we all do well. And districts, I'm telling you, are the best way to do that. We had a raid in my community in 2006. We had kids that were left behind because they didn't know if their parents were even home. You know who took care of them? The teachers. They stayed at schools until somebody was able to find someone for them to go to, a relative or someone that they knew. But teachers stayed late to help them. When we had a flood in my community, you know how we got resources to people? Through our district. Because we knew our parents trusted our schools. This is the answer. And we have got to fight for it. So I am not on the State Board of Ed anymore. I lost that race. But I learned enough that I'm still mad. And I still want to fight. So I now serve on the A for Pep Board. And along with Rob, we continue to do this work to make sure that people understand that where we are now is not new. It's not a surprise. This was always the plan. And we have got to wake up and we've got to fight this together, and we can. Thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Okay, I just wanted to show this video real quick.
It's you liberals who have lifted them up.
Oh, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard, you liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, political jobs.
Oh, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
Oh, no, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has it. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. If, in fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.
And now I'm proud to introduce Jackie Falcone.
I just wanted to give you guys an overview of the funding. And it kind of looks like a trickle down funding from billionaires out of the state. So we have Sam Walton, John Arnold, and these were the big spenders, and they trickle down money to city funds, to Root Ed, which is a local group in Denver, Denver Families for Public Schools, 50 can and 10 Transform Education Now, to the school board. So Sam Walton does have, he did have Christian leanings. He was a longtime member of the First Presbyterian Church in Bentonville, Arkansas. He taught Sunday school, and he regularly recruited Christians to work at his businesses and his stores. And he recruited from Christian colleges, like John Brown University. Sam Walton, he focused on servant leadership and he peddled Christian servitude to his employees. And he believed that Christians made good citizens and excellent workers. So the Walton Family Foundation primarily focuses on charter schools. And Sam Walton's own children, Alice and Jim Walton, put $250 million dollars of grant towards building charter school facilities. And that was in 2016. They created the Building Equity Initiative to create and expand more charter schools. And this was established after the foundation announced that it would spend $1 billion over the next 5 years to expand educational opportunities by partnering with charter school operations and researchers and education reformers. Mostly their money is spent on Republican candidates, but they do contribute to, just like Rob was saying, they do partnership. The Republicans and Democrats partner when it comes to education reform. So just looking at John Arnold, he started donating to KIPP, Knowledge is Power program. And that was a school that was started in 1994 by Teach for America alumni. And KIPP was the largest charter network in the United States. Right now, I believe there are 3 KIPPs in Southwest Denver, and there are 2 in the far Northeast. John and Laura pledged $10 million to help KIPP add on 42 more schools in Houston by 2017. And their foundation was started in 2008. They have given millions to Washington, D.C. schools for merit pay, to TFA. And one thing that's interesting is Arnold has also targeted public pensions. He has funded ballot initiatives, tainted research, lobbying, and political campaigns to eliminate traditional pensions. And he donates to right-wing think tanks to fund research that supports eliminating public pensions. So he's kind of delving into a lot of different things. I can't figure out why he's attacking pensions. Maybe somebody else can answer that. Reed Hastings is the founder of Netflix. He's a strong advocate for charter schools. He was appointed to the State Board of Education by Governor Gray Davis in 2000. He became president in 2001. He advocated for more English instruction and language testing for non-English speaking students, which was opposed by California Democrats at that time, and he eventually resigned. In 2012, he founded Hastings Fund, and he geared $100 million to children's education. In March 2014, he argued for the elimination of elected school boards. On July 23rd, 2024, he supported Kamala Harris for presidential election and made a multi-million-dollar donation to the Republican Accountability PAC. So while John Arnold and Reed Hastings, I didn't find them to have any religious ties, but like Rob said, they do partner with the religious billionaires because they all have the common agenda of privatization, leading to vouchers, closing schools, opening more charter schools. So their money goes down to City Fund. So City Fund is primarily funded by Reed Hastings and John Arnold. Their strategy is to grow the number of charter schools run by nonprofits rather than traditional school boards. This was founded in 2017, so not too long ago, 8 years ago. And by 2018, they raised $189 million from Hastings Arnold Foundation, which gave $19 million, and others had given out $15 million to organizations in 7 target cities, including Denver. As of 2020, they have raised $225 million, both largely from Hastings and Arnold. They've received contributions of over $78 million, have spent $55 million, have assets worth $39 million, according to the only tax return publicly available as of 2022. So City Fund also receives funding from the Dell Foundation, the Gates Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and the Ballmer Group. They created a political arm called Public School Allies, which has raised $15 million from Hastings and Arnold to support candidates running for state and local office. So this money from Hastings, the Walton family, and John Arnold trickles down to city fund, which then trickles down to our school board in Denver. So back here in 2021, more than 1 million was spent by independent expenditure committees funded by Colorado League of Charter Schools, Education Reform Now Advocacy, and 50 CAN on the reformer candidates. In the last election, 2023, 1.4 million out-of-state dark money, mostly from city fund, was spent on their 3 favorite candidates. The DCTA also supported their own candidates, but DCTA supported candidates were outspent by over 5-1, and city fund used digital TV advertising, mailers, text messaging to get the word out for their candidates. And then Better Leaders, Stronger Schools is the independent expenditure founded in 2023 for out-of-state dark money. Denver Families Action is a political arm of Denver Families for Public Schools, is also a big funder to this race. And more than 1 million in 2021, more than 1 million was spent by independent expenditure committees funded by Colorado. I think I already read that. Yeah. Let me go to the next part. Sorry. So city fund grantees. City fund grantees fund Root Ed, which is a local group. They just merged with Denver Families this past year. They also give money to Denver Families for Public Schools, which was started in 2021. And they fund 50 CAN, which is a national organization founded in 2011. And then 10 is a local sect of 50 CAN. So Root Ed started in 2017. They are funded and started by City Fund. They received $40 million from 2018 to 2022. And Root Ed aligns with City Fund policy. They want to expand charter schools, privatization, vouchers. They believe in the portfolio model of running schools like businesses. They support school choice, including charter schools. Schools are labeled high or low performing according to test scores. High performing schools are closed down, they are duplicated and grow, while low performing schools are closed or restructured. And you guys know that most high performing schools are going to be kids with high income families, and poor schools are not. So some of their schools that they fund are DSST, KIPP, Rocky Mountain Prep, formerly Strive, have expanded this policy. Denver Families for Public Schools, now that they're part of Root Ed, they all get the same money from City Fund. And also 50 CAN gets money from City Fund as well. And their aim is to increase, that just went out. Oh, sorry, it went up. Aims to increase the number of students in charter schools. They operate in state and local teams in 9 states, including Colorado. And this is interesting too, because Daryl Bradford is the board president of 50 CAN. He's an ardent supporter of vouchers, school choice, and believes that competition and the marketplace, driven by parent choice, are the best ways to create, reward, and regulate schools. And you guys know that Trump just mandated the money. He wants to put more money. What is that? I can't think. Trump just had he wants to put more money into charter schools, school choice. And I just wanted to read, so Daryl Bradford is the president of 50 CAN. And what he said was, so he signed Trump signed sweeping executive order Wednesday, or a few weeks ago, that would prioritize and free up federal funding to expand charter school choice program. Daryl Bradford agreed with this. What he said about this is, this executive order is, it's timely, given many governors, families, students, and educators across the nation in all types of schools are celebrating National School Choice Week right now, and I am sure many other advocates at the state level look forward to seeing the recommendations put forth on this uniquely popular issue. 10 receives money from 50 CAN, and like Rhonda said, Nick Martinez is a member of this, and he's always said, well, we don't support vouchers, we don't support vouchers. But if the president of 50 CAN supports vouchers, then you do too. And I think one of the reasons they say this is because they know that Denver does not support vouchers. When you bring up vouchers, people are against it. So they speak to their audiences. They won't bring vouchers up, but they do bring the charter school. They promote those charter schools. And when you look at charter schools, they have no oversight. They get our taxpayer money. Most of the charter schools, our kids, brown and black kids, are segregated into charter schools. So they are deliberately making our kids go to the charter schools, selling them this idea. I have kids at my school, Bruce Randolph, who went to charter schools when they were younger, and they're like, oh, I didn't know these were charter schools. Their parents don't know what the charter schools are about. They don't know where they're getting money from. They don't know that they're trying to make profits off their own kids. And they sell this idea, well, the neighborhood school down the street is not good. I'm just kind of considering myself, my kids went to neighborhood schools. My kids went to a red school, a failing school. It was Gilpin Montessori at the time. They went there for elementary school. Both of my kids were at Manual, another school that's considered, well, it's coming up from red to yellow, but my kids did well. My kids got a good education. The teachers are great. I myself taught at South High School for 18 years. So if you look at this whole thing about good schools, bad schools, I went to Bruce Randolph. Bruce Randolph is in the red. So does that mean that all of a sudden I become a bad teacher and then I'm working at a bad school? So it really doesn't make sense. But it's done for a purpose. They want to label the schools so they can have a reason to close them and to push our kids to charter schools. And the biggest concern, oh look, so these are all the root ed grantees. These are all charter schools and charter school organizations they also give money to. But the biggest thing is that how do we educate parents on how their kids are being used in charter schools? How do we teach them about what charter schools entail? How they have no excuse rules, how they can have teachers who are not licensed, how they can come up with their own rules, how there's no oversight, there's no transparency. And I've even heard of charter schools that don't allow parents to come into the school. They have to drop their kids off. You know, what are they trying to hide? They have to drop their kids off the building outside, pick up outside. But that's the biggest concern is how do we get kids to know, people to know that their kids are being segregated into charter schools and that these charter schools aren't actually better for their kids, because if you look at the rules, they're real, the scores, you don't see any difference between charter schools and public schools. All right, Milo's saying shut up, but I just think it's important. Also, I would encourage you guys to look up 50 CAN, look up 10, look up Root Ed, look at Denver Families, and see there's like this incestual relationship with all the members. They all are part of each other's organizations. And I highly encourage you to look at even groups like Educate Denver, because they all have common memberships. And so it kind of just shows you guys they're all in that same agenda of privatizing, starting vouchers, and making more charters.
Thank you, Jackie. We're going to give 90 seconds more to Rob. Guys, I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to give 90 seconds more to Rob.
Thank you for allowing me to not leave people on the horrible, depressing angle. And we'll get this out through Milo and to all of you too. There are also some specific things. This is the only thing that I really wanted to touch on of what you can do. And it takes a little bit of effort, but it can't just be me and Rhonda and Jackie exposing these movements. The more people that take a little bit of interest and put out a little bit of effort to learn more about these networks and what it is that they're doing, the better it's going to be for all of us. So get yourself into a situation where you can start educating people. And I'm not talking about, getting into a situation where you stand up in front of a crowd full of people and explain this stuff. I'm talking, the important conversations are the ones you have over your fence. Whenever you run into people in the grocery store, those are the kiss from my line. Those are the important conversations where you can at least start exposing people to this. Host an event, host a screening, run a book club. There's information out there for you to do this. And one of the things is that I do have this. If you want to grab a QR code, I do have a lot of recommendations here for books you can read in order to learn more about this. One of them is Catherine Stewart's book, The Power Worshippers. It's my primary reference. If you want to learn more about Christian nationalism, read The Power Worshippers. In June, AFRPEP is actually hosting a webinar, and Catherine Stewart is going to be our guest for that too. You'll be able to hear from her in person. The other one that's really good too is They Came for the Schools. That's a book that describes what happened in South Lake. So I would recommend any of those. So. You want to go this? Yes. Got time?
The last one.
Okay. This is how I'm going to wrap up.
My granddad was a Baptist preacher. I've been a member of this church since I was 2 years old, and now I'm in seminary studying to become a minister myself. My faith means more to me than anything. But if I'm being very honest, sometimes I hesitate for telling someone I'm a Christian. There is a cancer on our religion. Until we confess the sin that is Christian nationalism and exorcise it from our churches, our religion can do a lot more damage than a six-pack of Lone Star. There is nothing Christian about Christian nationalism. It is the worship of power, social power, economic power, political power in the name of Christ. And it is a betrayal of Jesus of Nazareth. He told us we would know them by their fruits. Jesus includes, Christian nationalism excludes. Jesus liberates, Christian nationalism controls. Jesus saves, Christian nationalism kills. Jesus started a universal movement based on mutual love. Christian nationalism is a sectarian movement based on mutual hate. Jesus came to transform the world. Christian nationalism is here to maintain the status quo. They have co-opted the Son of God. They've turned this humble rabbi into a gun-toting, gay-bashing, science-denying, money-loving, fear-mongering fascist. And it is incumbent upon all Christians to confront it and denounce it.
I think we learned a lot tonight. There's still so much more work we can do. And I think the Latino Education Coalition will continue to gather and start breaking down into committees to start breaking down these barriers that we're seeing tonight. I really want to thank our three guests, Rob Rogers, Jackie Falcone, and Rhonda Solis. We'll give them a round of applause. I want to thank El Seminario for always being in our community, and I would encourage you all to continue to subscribe to El Seminario. Thank you for filming. Thank you for being here and always being in our space.